Hey, everyone! If you enjoy my quantum audiobooks, you can support me by becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me keep creating, and you'll get exclusive perks. You can also access my audiobooks directly through Google Drive. Check out the link in the description. Now, let's get started.
If the hammer contains the core of a dying fixed star, wouldn't it weigh billions of tons? Stark observed the hammer and doubted Lin Chongqing's words. Do those gods have so much strength to use such a heavy thing as a weapon? Lin Chongqing curled his lips and said, "You are not very strong. Why can you wear hundreds of kilograms of armor and fly up and down?" Stark raised his eyebrows. "So, there's an energy source in this hammer?" Lin Chongqing. "The mother of all winds is its energy source." Stark looked at the hammer with interest. "I wonder if I can open it and see." Lin Chongqing laughed and said, "It's not that there is no ability to break it, but with the technology, it is completely impossible." And he paused for a moment before saying, "I just mentioned that this hammer is Thor's closest comrade in arms. You actually want to break the hammer. Do you want the Earth to go to war with Asgard?" Phil Coulson heard this and said hurriedly, "What we want to know more is how the treasure and the myth ended up here." "Who knows?" Lin Chongqing shrugged. "Maybe Asgard had a family dispute and accidentally dropped the hammer. F***K family dispute." Phil Coulson grinned. "Are all Norse mythologies true?" "Half true and half false." Lin Chongqing pointed to the cloudy sky. "Norse mythology divides the world into 9 kingdoms, connected by the world tree. The 9 worlds have different life forms. Midgard is the world where humans live. Asgard is the home of the gods. Jotunheim is the kingdom of giants. Niflheim is the land of eternal ice. In fact, the so-called world tree is a natural space bridge connecting the 9 worlds. The 9 kingdoms do not refer to 9 planets, but 9 star fields. Asgard is the supreme ruler of these 9 star fields. The Earth has long been in the sight of aliens. If it were not for the protection of Asgard, and the Sorcerer Supreme's deterrence has long been sold as slaves by alien forces. In the plot of SHIELD the Agent, this is the result of Earth civilization, because the Earth was torn apart by King Wanlian Vibe. Most of the Earthlings were wiped out, and a small number of Earthlings were kept in space cities and became slaves sold at will by many alien alliances. This is the fate of those who lose their protectors. Stark asked curiously, "Sorcerer Supreme? Who is that?" Lin Chongqing said calmly, "The real Earth Asgardian." Sitwell interrupted, "Earth Asgardian? How come we have never heard of it?" Lin Chongqing glanced at him and said sarcastically, "Maybe it's because your level is too low." Phil Coulson felt his scalp itchy, and Natasha Romanoff suddenly asked, "If Norse mythology is true, then are other myths true too?" Lin Chongqing glanced at everyone and said, "Since you want to know, it doesn't matter if I tell you. Most myths, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, celestial mythology, etc., are basically all real. Definitely, because of many rumors, many myths have been misinterpreted. For example, in the Norse mythology, Loki, the god of lies, is Thor's uncle, but in fact, Loki is Odin's son and Thor's younger brother. There are many similar mistakes." Everyone was silent for a while. After a long while, Sitwell said, "I think they must be aliens. It's just that the ancient people had limited knowledge, so they worshipped them as gods." Lin Chongqing smiled faintly. "Relatively speaking, the gods on Earth have purer blood than humans. They are the lives that were born completely from this land. They are the real masters of this land." Natasha Romanoff asked hurriedly, "Since they are the masters of the Earth, why are they gone now?" Lin Chongqing spread his hands. "Because the Earth has become the test site of the cosmic god, and the Earth god is naturally powerful, which makes them completely occupy the right to speak on this planet. The cosmic god does not want them to interfere with their experiments, so they beat them one by one and drove them out of the Earth." Phil Coulson's mouth twitched, frowned, and said, "Don't tell me the humans are the test subjects of the cosmic god." Lin Chongqing said lightly, "It's a pity the humans are the experimental subjects of the cosmic god, and they are no different from the mice kept in cages by scientists. Whether it is Stark or S.H.I.E.L.D., They don't know much about Lin Chongqing. Therefore, they can't help but doubt the information he told them. Barton's expression was slightly cold. What experiments do those cosmic gods want to do with us? Civilization. Lin Chongqing uttered a word, and then said, they like to observe the evolution of civilization, and for this purpose they created many races in the universe, and the human race is just one of them. He paused and continued. In fact, humans are not the earliest experimental subjects selected by the cosmic gods on Earth. Before the birth of the human race, the cosmic gods created two races, one of which you should be familiar with, the Titans, and the other is called the Abnormal. The two races they multiplied on this planet and created a brilliant civilization. But later, the universe heaven thought that the evolution of the abnormal civilization was inconsistent with their plan, so they wiped out the entire civilization. When they wiped out the abnormal civilization, they used too much force. The Earth, which was originally a whole, split and gradually became the 7 continents and 4 oceans today. Half of the surviving part of the abnormal civilization went underground and became the people in the center of the Earth. The other half stayed on the ground and gradually evolved into humans. I believe that after hearing this news, Heinanden will not need to sleep in the future. Phil Coulson frowned and said helplessly, Mr. Lin, let's talk about these topics with director Nick Fury. Some things are not good to know too much. He is just a Mediterranean now, and he doesn't want to enter the ranks of strong so quickly. It's better to leave the work of distinguishing the truth from the falsehood of his words to others. Okay. Lin Chongqing shrugged innocently and glanced at Mjolnir, continuing the topic of 560 just now. Does anyone want to lift Mjolnir 10 times? Phil Coulson smiled bitterly and said, when we built the outpost, many agents tried, but unfortunately no one could pick it up. Not to mention picking it up, they couldn't even shake it. Natasha Romanoff sighed. After Fixstar ran out of fuel and died, the core part left behind was so dense that it was unimaginable. Maybe a grain of dust had hundreds of billions of tons. If this hammer really contained the residual core of Fixstar, how could we shake it? I said, this is a weapon of God. Don't use physical formulas rigidly. Lin Chongqing looked at her and said, as long as you can get its recognition, you can pick it up. Melinda suddenly asked, what is the standard of recognition? Lin Chongqing thought for a while. Simply put, it's the type of personality of Captain America. As a fan of Captain America, Phil Coulson smiled proudly and suggested, maybe when we find Captain America, we can let him try again. Lin Chongqing rolled his eyes. Do you think this is yours? You can come and get it whenever you want. At this time, it is estimated that the silly hammer god has already gone to the pet store to borrow a horse, and will soon come and cry with his hammer. How can he have so much time to wait to dig out Captain America? As he said, Lin Chongqing looked at Black Widow and smiled. But you might as well give it a try. Me? Natasha Romanoff was a little surprised, shook her head and laughed. I don't think my character can be compared with Captain America. Lin Chongqing shrugged. I just think you have the potential. Barton smiled and encouraged. Natasha Romanoff, just give it a try. There's no harm anyway. Natasha Romanoff thought for a while, nodded. Okay, I'll try. She walked to Mjolnir, put her hand on the hammer handle, and tried to pull it up. However, the hammer didn't move at all. VR. Natasha Romanoff was mentally prepared, and she was not depressed when she saw this, but just laughed at herself. I said, I don't have such great sentiments. Lin Chongqing shook his head regretfully. Unfortunately, you are not qualified now. Barton keenly noticed his choice of words. She is not qualified now? Will she be qualified in the future? Maybe. Lin Chongqing smiled meaningfully. Black Widow's spiritual transformation should be after the flashing incident. Infinite Thanos snapped his fingers on Earth, and half of the creatures in the entire universe disappeared. The Avengers Alliance disbanded in despair, leaving only Black Widow to guard the Avengers Alliance base alone. At that time, she would definitely be recognized by Mjolnir. But now Black Widow is obviously not at that level. At this time, she is just a ruthless female spy. Late at night, the alarm bells in the base echoed. What's going on? Phil Coulson hurriedly turned on the intercom and asked. Sir, an unknown intruder was found at the western border. Unknown intruder? Phil Coulson looked at his boss. After knowing the origin of this alien hammer, Nick Fury has personally rushed here. At the moment, the Black Egg heard this and suddenly turned his head and asked, Mr. Lin, who do you think broke in? Mjolnir is indeed a good thing, but not everyone can use it. Besides, there is nothing valuable here. Who would be so bored to force his way in? Even if he has to use such a reckless method, he must be someone who knows the value of the hammer to see Mjolnir. He has been thinking about Asgard for a while, so he quickly remembered what Lin Chongqing said before. Maybe Asgard had a family dispute and accidentally dropped the hammer. Could this person who suddenly broke in be the original owner of Mjolnir? Lin Chongqing smiled faintly and did not answer, but just said casually, No matter who comes, you can withdraw the people who block him. Won't you know his purpose soon? ? At this time, Hawkeye's voice came from the intercom. Sir, the intruder has no weapons, but the fighting ability is very strong. Do you need me to kill him? Wait, let all agents clear the road. I want to see what he wants to do. Fury stood up quickly and walked out of the lounge. Without the obstruction of the SHIELD agent, the intruder moved much faster. In just a few minutes, he found the location of Mjolnir in the complex passage. I don't know if it was because of the perception of the owner's arrival. The electromagnetic waves radiated by Mjolnir became more rapid, and the thunder and rain in the sky became several times more violent. The heavy rain enveloped Mjolnir in the middle, and the ground around it was muddy. The blond and burly white young man didn't care at all, but showed an excited smile on his face. He strode forward, grasped the handle of the hammer, and gently lifted it up. The hammer didn't move at all. Seeing this scene, Fury couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. Next, the white youth, with a look of shock in his eyes, grasped the handle of the hammer with both hands and pulled it upward with all his strength. However, the hammer seemed to be frozen like the ground, and there was no reaction at all. Ah! The white youth seemed to understand something, and his expression instantly turned into hysterical despair, and he roared in grief and anger towards the sky. Fury sighed in disappointment, picked up the intercom, and ordered, Okay, the show is over. The ground troops enter. The appearance of the SHIELD agents did not cause any reaction from the blond youth. He knelt on the muddy ground, letting the heavy rain pour all over his body like a lifeless statue, until Lin Chongqing walked in front of Mjolnir, put his hand on his shoulder, and said calmly, Hey, young man, how does it feel to be abandoned by your own wife? The faint voice made Thor's anger even stronger. He raised his hand and swung a fist, roaring, Mjolnir will never abandon me. I am its only and eternal master. Boom! Thor's sturdy body was thrown out heavily, and the small mound next to it collapsed. Your father obviously didn't tell you that Mjolnir was not specially built for you. Your father was its first owner, and your sister was its second owner. Compared with your father and sister, you are as fragile as a little chicken. Lin Chongqing threw the hammer nonchalantly. Mortal, you are slandering. Thor struggled to stand up from the mud, his face full of anger, but when he saw the hammer played with by Lin Chongqing in his hand, his anger instantly turned into fear. What are you slandering? Lin Chongqing held Mjolnir and waved it lightly, and lightning flashed instantly. Impossible! Impossible! Thor's face changed again, and he shouted in despair. Mjolnir, are you really going to abandon me? Father, is this what you expect? Hey, not only are you not smart, but your eyes are also crippled. Lin Chongqing rolled his eyes and said unhappily, Isn't your hammer still here? Well, the hammer he was playing with was just a projection of Mjolnir. The replica version of Mjolnir is one level higher than the original hammer. The bonus to Lin Chongqing is far less than that of the Orion cloth. Thor's eyes almost popped out. Is he dazzled? There are actually 2 Mjolnir. After a long while, Thor woke up from his astonishment, turned his head abruptly, stared at him, and asked, What's going on? Lin Chongqing, what's going on? Thor's eyes were wide open, full of confusion. Why are there 2 Mjolnir? I can feel that they have the same power of thunder. Lin Chongqing shrugged and said, "Nothing, just used magic to imitate one." "You are a magician?" Thor opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. "There are magicians on Earth." Lin Chongqing shook his head and curled his lips and said, "So, compared to your father, Qian Wang Zhao, and sister, you two brothers are really ignorant and pitiful. As the heir of Asgard, you don't know Kamar Taj? Lei Dachui's head must be full of muscles, and Loki's head is probably full of bad water. They only live in their own small circle, love and kill each other every day, and have no interest in the outside world." Thor, who was despised again, said angrily, "Say it again. I don't have a sister. Whether you have a sister or not is not up to you, but your parents." 1. Lin Chongqing threw the fake Mjolnir right in front of him and asked sarcastically, "Your Highness, the Prince of Asgard, you can't lift your Mjolnir. Maybe you could try this one first?" X. Thor's expression froze, and he raised his hand, but didn't dare to hold it. If he chose this hammer, wouldn't it mean betraying Mjolnir? Fury looked at him and told Phil Coulson, "Phil Coulson, please take this prince to the lounge first and let him calm down for a while. Although the phoenix that fell to the ground is not as good as a chicken, he is still a prince, and a prince in myths and legends. If it is not necessary, Sechildi dare not make things too difficult for him." Phil Coulson nodded, called a few agents, carefully helped Thor up, and took him to the lounge upstairs. Thor did not react at all during the whole process. Mjolnir no longer recognized his qualifications, which made him feel extremely sad and desperate. Fury turned to Lin Chongqing again and said, "Mr. Lin, you seem to have known what happened." Lin Chongqing answered slowly, "It is probably that the god King Odin of Asgard was unhappy with his son who only had muscles in his brain, so he put a test on his brain-dead son. Isn't there a similar time in myths and legends?" Fury said, a little unhappy, "You mean Odin wanted Thor to grow up, so he exiled his son to the earth? Given the weak level of Earth civilization, if this prince got into trouble on Earth, would Asgard not pacify the Earth? It was simply an unprovoked disaster." Before he could finish his unhappy words, Lin Chongqing glanced at him and said lightly, "There is a gatekeeper in Asgard, Heimdall. His eyes can see every corner of the 9 realms, and his ears can hear any sound in the 9 realms. Now his eyes are fixed here. Director Nick Fury, do you want to try Asgard's anger? Friendly reminder, Asgard's Bifrost, in addition to 960, can teleport people to any corner of the 9 realms at will. It is also a powerful Star Destroyer weapon. As long as it is aimed at the Earth for a full hour, the Earth will explode like a firework in the universe." Fury's face froze immediately. At this time, Phil Coulson suddenly came over, pointed at the image on the tablet, and whispered, "Sir, I think you should take a look at this." Lounge. "Loki, why are you here?" Thor, who was dejected, looked more lively. Loki said in a low voice, "I have to come to see you." Thor shouted nervously, "What happened? Tell me, is it about Jotunheim? Let me explain to my father." "Father is dead." "What?" Loki's answer stunned Thor, as if his soul was pulled out of his body at this moment, empty and unable to land. "Exiling you, the threat of war, made him unbearable. You don't have to blame yourself. I know you love him. I tried to tell him, but he didn't listen. Knowing that you can't lift Mjolnir, it's still within your reach. It's too cruel." Loki talked nonsense seriously, and finally concluded, "Now the burden of the throne falls on my shoulders." The hammer betrayed. His father passed away. Thor was heartbroken. His mind was a mess. And after a long while he asked, almost begging, "Can I go home? The truce with Jotunheim is that you will be exiled forever, and your mother will not allow you to go home." Loki said the most pointed words in a gentle voice, "I'm here to say goodbye, brother." Through the remote monitoring system, watching Thor sing a monologue to the air, crying like a child in his 20s or 30s, a group of SHIELD agents all looked confused. Stark noticed something and asked, "Lin, is there an invisible visitor in there?" "Yes." Lin Chongqing looked at Loki's performance and introduced casually, "A very famous magician in the 9 realms, Thor's younger brother, the god of mischief Loki in Norse mythology. Phil Coulson asked, "So what is the purpose of this god of mischief coming to Earth?" Judging from Thor's current expression, it doesn't look like good news. No matter what kind of news it is, it's Asgard's internal affairs. Lin Changqing did not stop Loki's deliberate provocation. Thor, a reckless man with a head full of muscles, would definitely not satisfy Odin without experiencing some special encounters. Loki had stimulated the fish-lipped Nissan enough and left the lounge with a smug smile. He originally planned to return to Asgard, but he saw Mjolnir quietly placed there. He has always been dissatisfied with Thor and believes that if Thor can do it, he can also do it. Now that Mjolnir has lost its master, maybe Loki floated down gracefully and landed in front of Mjolnir. He stretched out one hand to pull the hammer handle, then held the hammer handle with both hands and shook it. Unfortunately, Mjolnir, which had lost its master, did not care about him, the newly promoted god of Asgard. Loki had nowhere to vent his anger, and suddenly heard a man's voice in his ear. "Is this the god of mischief, Loki?" Loki looked in the direction of the voice and saw a middle-aged man in iron armor standing on the upper corner looking at him. Loki's first thought was, my magic is ineffective, because not only the iron-armored man was looking at him, but also the young man next to the iron-armored man was looking at him, and even other people looked over. "Yes, he is." Lin Changqing smiled and said, "Do you want to use the legendary god to prove the power of your battlesuit?" But he looks so weak. Star showed contempt. Thor had already disappointed him. This god of mischief who was sneaky and cunning didn't seem to be a powerful life. Before Lin Changqing could answer, Loki below was upset. "Foolish mortals, you are blaspheming the gods." Thor's character was arrogant and conceited, and Loki was not much better than him. In the eyes of these two brothers, mortals were stupid and weak, and only worthy of crawling at their feet. Especially Loki, who was cold by nature, was arrogant and self-abased. He valued the face of God more than Thor, and after learning that he was a child picked up, this mentality became more obvious. Lin Changqing and others stood on a high place, watching him unscrupulously, which made him feel humiliated in his increasingly sensitive heart, and naturally burst out immediately. Boom! Slight tearing air sounds came, and a touch of black appeared beside Lin Changqing, and a bright magic head pierced his back. However, the dagger had just been thrust out when a surge of impact force was created, knocking Loki flying and throwing him into the mud. "That's it." Stark put away the electromagnetic pulse and looked down on him. Lin Changqing, who was leaning against the iron frame to watch the show, reminded him, since he could be called a god, he can't be easily solved. "You have to be careful." "Really?" Stark curled his lips, jumped off the metal frame. Boom! The heavy armor was like a giant hammer, knocking down Loki's struggling figure again. The exploding shockwave brought wet dirt and stones, blowing the high-strength walls on all sides into sieves. "Is this the end?" Fury said he didn't understand. The first prince was a fool, and the second prince was also a weakling. He couldn't even fight Iron Man alone, so Asgard didn't seem to be anything great. But this thought only flashed through his mind, because Loki, who was knocked flying, suddenly appeared from behind Iron Man and launched a strong shockwave from his hand, hitting him hard on the back. Under the strong impact, he was thrown high into the air. Before Iron Man could adjust his center of gravity, Loki jumped up and punched him in the chest. Boom! He fell heavily from the air to the ground and crashed into the ruins of the collapsed wall. Loki, who had changed into the clothes of the gods in an instant, looked like a noble from the Renaissance. He looked down at Iron Man, who was beaten into the mud and was motionless, raised his head with a gloomy face, glanced at Lin Changqing and his party on the platform, and sneered, "You made me so embarrassed. You all have to be executed." Before he finished speaking, Iron Man turned over and said with a grin, "Hey, idiot over there, you and I haven't finished fighting yet." Lin Changqing stood on the platform with a smile on his face. "Stark, this guy is a god after all." "Well, although he's a very weak god, a god is a god, much stronger than ordinary people, you must not be careless." "I already know." Stark looks serious. The armor that can perfectly resist tank guns cannot eliminate the opponent's power. Just the aftermath of penetration makes him feel dizzy. How dare he underestimate the enemy? Loki is indeed not a very strong character, but that is compared with the top superheroes. He has the blood of the ice giants. His physique is no less than that of the Asgard gods. He has super physical strength and power. At the same time, he also has magic abilities that are enough to rank among the top 9 realms. It can be said that most superheroes are not as good as him. Iron Man wants to fight Loki alone, but the current model is not enough. Mortal! Loki's voice is almost squeezed out from his teeth. Do you think you can beat the gods? His figure continues to lengthen under the light, and the same illusions are spread all over the corners in an instant. As a magician who likes close combat, Loki has maxed out his illusion ability. Don't think too highly of yourself. Stark spun around and fired the cluster gun function from his chest. The rapidly rotating beam cannon penetrated a series of phantoms and tore the metal shed in the sky. The heavy rain from the sky became more chaotic, smashing the torn metal shed with a loud noise. The impact of the speed of sound came in the face, and the temporary base that SHIELD had built with great difficulty was destroyed in the blink of an eye under the destructive power of the energy beam. But Loki's illusion was also completely eliminated by the full-screen attack. Crack! Just like the Earth withstood the meteorite, the energy beam eliminated all the phantoms of Loki, but hitting the real Loki's body was no different from hitting high-strength metal. With the strong physique of the giants of Jotunheim, it was really easy to resist the attack of the energy beam cannon. The area where Mjolnir was parked was shrouded in darkness. In the fierce battle between Stark and Loki, all nearby light sources were destroyed. They could only rely on seeing the glow of the reactor on Iron Man's chest and the roar of short-range missiles like thunder. In a battle of this level, ordinary agents are useless, so Fury drove away a large number of agents, leaving only a few high-level agents, all wearing night vision equipment, standing high to observe the battle. From time to time, invisible impacts passed through their bodies, just like the feeling of being burned by low-voltage electric current. Fury and others who had already seen similar battles were fine. But Hitwill, who was in close contact with high-intensity battles for the first time, couldn't help trembling slightly all over his body and took a breath of hot and cold air from time to time. He was not only a middle-level cadre of S.H.I.E.L.D., but also a middle-level cadre of HYDRA. He had seen similar scenes in video files, but it was completely different from seeing it with his own eyes. Now, he just wanted to run away. Unfortunately, Nick Fury would not agree, and Alexander Pierce would not agree either. Hawkeye stroked the bowstring, loosening and tightening it, tightening and loosening it, and exclaimed, "The firepower of the steel battle suit is more terrible than before." Natasha Romanoff continued expressionlessly, "But obviously this alien prince is more terrible." At the moment of the battle situation, Iron Man was already a little stretched, and most of the ammunition he carried with him had been consumed, and now he could only rely on energy cannons to hold the field. But whether it was energy cannons, bullets, shells, or missiles, they could not do anything to Loki. Moreover, Loki had many tricks, and he played 2 small daggers very well, and even integrated illusions into them, firmly grasping the rhythm of the battle. If the steel battlesuit had not always maintained the flight state, Stark would have been pierced by the small dagger. Hawkeye could naturally see the situation clearly and said, "Iron Man is not that guy's opponent. Are we a helper?" Before he finished speaking, a beam of light suddenly slid down from the dark sky and hit Iron Man's back. Bang! Iron Man was caught off guard. Man suddenly fell from mid-air, dragging a long trail on the ground. Damn it! Stark, with stars in his eyes, felt a tightness in his chest, but he didn't bother to think and immediately stood up and prepared to take off again. At this moment, Loki's mocking voice sounded behind him. "Human, why do you think you can have an air advantage when fighting magicians?" Loki gently raised his eyebrows, his cold expression with a bit of contempt. The next moment, Loki snorted disdainfully and stabbed forward with 2 daggers. Swish! The tough superalloy was torn into pieces like cardboard. The superalloy created by Earth civilization is like cardboard that can be broken with a single poke in front of Asgard's artifact. Two pools of scarlet blood quickly seeped out from Stark's ribs. You blasphemous be asterisk 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 D. I'll lock you up in Helheim. Loki chuckled arrogantly and poured magic power into the two daggers. The magic power that this great magician burst out instantly stirred up a whirlwind-like airflow in the air, which could crush the monster from the inside out. If this power stirred an Iron Man's body, it could instantly turn him into a pool of blood mud. Suddenly, a high-pitched dragon roar sounded in the darkness. Loki was startled and didn't care about bursting magic power. He immediately pulled back the dagger and tried to turn over to avoid it. Unfortunately, his speed was too slow. At the moment he retracted the dagger, a green dragon shining with lightning came from far away, roaring and hitting his chest. Yen asterisk. Boom! Like being hit by a meteorite falling from the sky. Loki was pushed by the dragon and flew far away. Tony, Nick Fury led a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and rushed over anxiously. After looking at the dying Stark, he immediately ordered, "Inject him with adrenaline first. No need to be so troublesome." Lin Chongqing came over leisurely and smiled at the pale Stark. "Hey, now you know how terrible God is, right?" Stark stared at Lin Chongqing with lifeless eyes, and his breathing became more and more chaotic. "Don't worry. I'm here. How can I let you die?" Lin Chongqing smiled faintly, stopped the black salted egg from saying something, and waved his hand to take out the giant holy cup. Psychokinesis moved, and water splashed in the holy cup. "Come, drink this." Lin Chongqing put the Holy Grail close to Stark's mouth and poured the newly formed holy water into it. Oh! Stark's throat was throbbing, and he swallowed several times in a row. A few seconds later, the dying Stark's face regained its rosy color, and he sighed happily. The people around him were stunned. Natasha Romanoff reached out and lifted the bloodstained collar, and the two bloodstains there had disappeared. "Mr. Lin, can I ask what the principle is?" Looking at the silver Holy Grail, Fury felt extremely excited. If S.H.I.E.L.D. had such a healing treasure, how much manpower and material resources would be saved? "This is the Holy Grail stained with the tears of a goddess, which can turn clean water into pure holy water." Lin Chongqing glanced at him, turned around, and put the Holy Grail back into the barrier, and said with a smile, "I suggest you don't covet it. You can't afford it, and you don't have the strength to grab it." Fury remained calm and smiled. "Mr. Lin is joking. I just thought that if possible, S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to buy some holy water for the agents in the Bureau who are disabled on duty." Lin Chongqing casually said, "I don't mind selling some holy water, but I have to remind you that the shelf life of holy water is limited. If you want to use it to heal people, it's best not to waste time." Natasha Romanoff reminded, "I think the most important thing for us now is the alien prince, right?" Looking at the small mushroom cloud rising in the distance, Fury's mouth twitched, and he said strangely, "He won't die, right? This is the Prince of Asgard. If he dies on Earth, who knows if Odin will blow up the Earth directly if he knows. Loki is very cunning. How could he die so easily?" Lin Chongqing smiled indifferently. "Definitely, it is inevitable to get hurt." He waved his hand, set off a hurricane, and dispersed the dust and smoke. On the muddy land a few hundred meters away, there were only wisps of rising white smoke, but no shadow of Loki. Lin Chongqing definitely knew that the guy had escaped back to Asgard. Old Bridgetown. The S.H.I.E.L.D. outpost was destroyed because of Mjolnir, which released electromagnetic waves that affected the weather, causing heavy rain in the nearby area. Nick Fury simply ordered that except for leaving 2 teams to build a small outpost and guard the buried Meowth hammer, all other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were to withdraw to Old Bridgetown. In the only hotel in the town, Nick Fury sat in a lobby that was clear of outsiders, flipping through the children's book, Norse Fairy Tales, and asked the dejected Thor indirectly, "Mr. Thor, you may not be able to go home for a while. Do you have any plans for your future behavior?" Thor hung his head, rubbed his cheeks with both hands, and said in a low voice, I messed up everything. Everything was wrong. This is the first time in my life that I don't know what to do next. Fury looked slightly happy and said hurriedly, Since you don't know what to do, why don't you come to our shield and see how it goes? Anyway, you're the former crown prince of Asgard, 660, and we will definitely treat you well. Although Thor was expelled from the earth, and his divine power was deprived by his father, his knowledge of the universe alone, even if he only took out a little bit, would be huge amounts of wealth for the earth. S.H.I.E.L.D. definitely would not let such a treasure wander around. Thor was silent. He only wanted to atone for his father's death. It didn't matter where he went or what he did. However, he didn't have a good impression of S.H.I.E.L.D., so it was difficult to decide for a while. Darcy excitedly suggested, You are the legendary Thor. You have such a good figure. I think you could be a model. S.H.I.E.L.D. cleared out Old Bridge Town, but Jane Foster, Darcy, and Dr. Eric Shavig, who had some connections with Thor, were naturally left behind. Jane glared at her unreliable bestie. Don't give blind advice. Darcy was very unconvinced. I'm right. You were drooling over his figure this morning, and you almost rushed over to lick it. Don't think I didn't see it. Shut up. Jane blushed, rushed over angrily, pinched her face, and pulled it out hard. Thor glanced at them with a bitter smile on his face. Now, when he hears this proud title again, he always feels ashamed. Dr. Shavig didn't say anything, full of doubts about the god's claims. In a world with such advanced technology, myths and legends have long been questioned. As one of the world's top scientists, he should be more skeptical of these flashy things. Definitely, if the big fool was an alien with special abilities, he might have believed it after a moment of hesitation. Modern society is like this. As long as you throw something incomprehensible to an alien, it is easy for people to believe it. Fury's heart moved, and he asked tentatively, Mr. Thor, in addition to your Aesir gods in the universe, what other gods are there? A lot. Thor replied dejectedly, the Vanir of Vanaheim, the Greek gods of Mount Olympus. Suddenly, he stood up from his chair, his muscles tensed, and looked out into the darkness. Fury's expression changed, and he asked, What happened? Thor glanced at the deep darkness and said without turning his head, I don't know, but I feel something is approaching. It's very dangerous and very familiar. Lin Chongqing, who was chatting with Stark, also turned his head to look out the window, frowned, and said, Well, the air is getting colder quickly. Fury looked at Phil Coulson, who nodded, turned on the intercom, and ordered, Everyone pay attention. There's danger approaching. Turn on the searchlight. DBU. The searchlight originally used for the temporary base and a shield. The agents had already been distributed in various locations in the town. More than a dozen searchlights were turned on at the same time, and the bright lights dispelled the darkness of the night. The town is still a town, but because of the arrival of the agents, the residents of the town have been moved away, so it is quieter than usual. In the strangely quiet town, apart from the silent streets and faint neon lights, some faint white traces are more conspicuous. A thin layer of white is attached to various places on the street, like pieces of ice and snow. Ice. It is indeed ice. But how can there be so much frost in New Mexico with a dry climate? The frost spreads quickly, dyeing the streets in a ice color. Thor opened the door of the hotel, touched the ground with his hand, and said with a grim face, I have seen such frost. It is the trace of the giants of Jotunheim. Cold weather will greatly increase their combat power. Lin Chongqing thought for a while and smiled. I didn't expect Loki didn't throw away the destroyer, but got the giants of Jotunheim first. Stark raised his eyebrows. What is the destroyer? Lin Chongqing shrugged. The steel battle suit dedicated to the god King Odin. Fury frowned and said, There is no trace of Bifrost. How can they enter the range of the earth? Thor thought for a while. I have heard my father say that Midgard, as the connection point of the Nine Realms, has special passages leading to other worlds, but those passages are very secret. Even my father doesn't know much. Thousands of years ago, the giants of Jotunheim once entered Midgard through a secret passage, intending to use their supreme artifact, the Frost Box, to transform Midgard into a place suitable for the giants of the glacial kingdom, where Jotunheim lives, but was blocked by the warriors of Asgard led by his father. Fury frowned. This is really not good news. It is not a good thing that the Earth has a connecting channel with other planets, and they're all wild and powerful planets. Thor said in a deep voice. With Heimdall watching, the giants of Jotunheim cannot invade in large numbers. Their target should be me. Fury and Phil Coulson looked at each other and probably guessed the initiator, but it was a pity that Lei Dachui obviously did not realize this. Phil Coulson said, "Sir, we are short of manpower here. Do we need to ask Kufong for help immediately? If the number of enemies is not large, we can handle it." Stark yawned, stood next to the armor, and was immediately wrapped in the armor. After the battle with Loki, his arrogance had disappeared, but he believed that with Lin Chongqing, he would at least not lose this battle. Hawkeye Barton began to check the bow and arrow, and Black Widow also took a deep breath, rubbed his wrist, and stood up. Even if we ask the military for help now, it's like a drop in the ocean that can't quench our thirst. Nick Fury shook his head calmly and issued orders in an orderly manner. Phil Coulson, order all agents to persuade the residents to go home and then stay in one place. If it's not necessary, don't fight the monsters. Also, let the research department open all the equipment. After this is over, I want all the records of the aliens. Lei Dachui's face twitched, and he hurriedly said that, although I have been deprived of my divine power, I know the giants of Jotunheim very well and can help. No need. Fury comforted seriously. Thor, you have lost your divine power now, so don't get too close. Barton, pay attention to protect Thor, O, and Dr. Jane, and others. Understood. Hawkeye tightened his quiver. Everyone, we have to teach those alien monsters a profound lesson. Fury looked around at everyone, ready to cheer them up, and then heard Phil Coulson exclaim, "Sir, look over there. So many giants." There weren't many ice giants that sneaked in, no more than 30 in total. However, when they emerged from the night on the ice and snow, they were like low mountains surrounding the entire town in the middle. Fury's face was very gloomy, and many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents swallowed their saliva subconsciously. Such an enemy is too incredible. How big are the bodies of the giants of Jotunheim? The height of a normal person can always reach the calf of a giant. Dozens of giants of Jotunheim lined up like a group of walking buildings without any intense movements. Just their bodies can scare a lot of people to death. Jane Foster licked her dry lips and asked in a low voice, "Thor, how many monsters could you deal with in the past?" The other agents also turned their heads and looked at the former god of thunder, only to find that his face was full of astonishment. The giants of Jotunheim I met were only about 3 meters tall at most, and I have never seen such a large size. He whispered, and his eyes suddenly trembled. Oops. Fury stared at him with one eye. Did you think of anything? I once heard my father mention that the giants of Jotunheim were in decline because Asgard defeated them and took away their treasure, the Winter Box, in a war 1,500 years ago. Thor's lips trembled, and he felt a strong sense of uneasiness. Without the Winter Box, the giants of Jotunheim have reduced their strength a lot. But are they going to break in again? Asgard stole the Winter Box, so it returned to its heyday. The brave and fearless god of thunder is never afraid of powerful enemies, but he is very afraid at this time. He is exiled, and the king of gods falls into a deep sleep. It can be said that this is the weakest moment of Asgard. If it is invaded by the giants of Jotunheim that have been watching for a long time, the consequences will be disastrous. Fury's eyes flashed with a gleam of light, and he said in a deep voice, "No matter why they become like this, we must stop them. We go out to delay time. You call the army as soon as possible." Stark looked solemn, nodded to Lin Chongqing, sprayed particle beams under his feet, and flew out of the window. Lin Chongqing glanced at the darkness in the distance, stretched out his hand and shook it, and the giant lord's cloth appeared from the void. The silver holy grail decomposed and turned into silver holy clothes, which were draped all over the body. The new holy clothes form made a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents looked surprised. Fury pursed his lips and said, I didn't expect this holy grail to be a battle suit. I have a lot of battle suits in different forms, but it's a pity that you can't use them, but Lin Chongqing turned his eyes and fell on Natasha Romanoff. This fake Mjolnir can be lent to you for a while. While the electric current was humming, he handed the projected version of Mjolnir to Black Widow. This Mjolnir is one level lower than the original one, but can also elevate humans to the level of Loki. It is enough to deal with those enhanced ice giants. Looking at the hammer flashing with lightning, Natasha Romanoff's eyes shrank slightly and looked over. Fury was excited, but he remained calm on the surface and said in a calm tone, Natasha Romanoff, since Mr. Lin believes in you, why are you hesitating? Thank you. Natasha Romanoff raised the corner of her lips and showed a teasing smile. She quickly reached out and grasped the handle of the hammer. Crack! Accompanied by the thunder that fell from the sky, Natasha Romanoff was covered with a layer of ancient armor. Thor was stunned. How? How is it possible? Lin Chongqing smiled faintly. Don't worry, your hammer is still at the outpost. This is just my imitation. Well, although the imitation is very similar, it is still a little worse than yours. Thor! Natasha Romanoff murmured to herself, and the ancient hammer in her hand spread out layers of electric current. Lin Chongqing pointed out the window. Don't you want to test it? Thank you. Natasha Romanoff quickly calmed down and smiled at Lin Chongqing. Go shot. Fury looked out the window. Be careful. Those monsters don't look easy to deal with. Understood. Natasha Romanoff nodded slightly, shook the fake Thor hammer, and rushed into the darkness outside the window with heavy lightning. Lin Chongqing smiled, and his figure disappeared suddenly. Fury let out a long breath and issued another order. Phil Coulson arranged for everyone to evacuate the town. Aren't we going to join the war? I don't think we can deal with those monsters with our firepower. Fury shook his head, but we could try long-range bombing. Phil Coulson, this task is handed over to you. Arrange excellent pilots to drive Quinjet into the field, and if the effect is not good, retreat immediately. Quinjet has missiles and aircraft cannons, and is the best fighter, which may cause some damage to those monsters. Understood. Phil Coulson nodded and turned to make arrangements. I'll try it too, Hawkeye suggested. There are a bunch of black technology arrows hanging behind him, and their power is not much weaker than Quinjet. Okay. Nick Fury waved his hand. Others, do your job. Act now. Giants of Jotunheim are not only the most terrifying warriors, but also natural ice magicians, and the ice and snow are the most favorable environment for them. With the rapid spread of frost in the town, the sky, which had just been clear, was covered with dark clouds again, and then heavy snow fell slowly, covering the hot town in the snow curtain. The black-clad agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are looking for a suitable shooting point. In the midst of chaos, a roar came from the depths of the snow curtain. Roar! A giant beast that is several times larger than a rhino, and an elephant suddenly poked its head out of the deep darkness, opened its ferocious mouth, and pounced on the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Retreat! Retreat quickly! The agents were startled and hurriedly pulled away. However, how could they possibly outrun the ice beast with their speed? The ice beast is a specialty of Jotunheim. Even the elite warriors of Asgard must form a team to fight it. When the reckless Lei Dachui and his friends raided Jotunheim, the three warriors and Sif were chased by the ice beast like mice. If Lei Dachui had not arrived in time, at least half of his friends would have been eaten. This ice beast is not an adult, but it is still not something that ordinary ice giants can resist. It can definitely eat several weak earthlings in one bite. Dozens of agents are within the hunting range. They are experienced in many battles and will not be scared, but the special 340 pistols in their hands are obviously useless. They can't even break the skin of the beast. They can only watch the bloody mouth approaching. Just then, swish, swish, swish. With the rapid tearing sound of the air, white marks broke through the air and drilled into the open mouth of the ice beast. The next second, a shockwave condensed from dozens of explosions, flipped the huge body of the ice beast backwards, and before it landed, another missile hit it, submerging the ice beast in a thick smoke. Everyone retreat immediately. Everyone retreat immediately. Stark's voice sounded in the intercom, and a group of agents who survived by chance looked at each other and swarmed towards the arranged base. The image in the thermal imager showed that the ice beast was bombarded by several micromissiles, but the signs of life still existed, so Stark's attack did not stop. He directly replaced the missiles with incendiary bombs. After hitting the ice beast with several bombs, the monster's wailing finally disappeared. The frost creatures of Jotunheim are most afraid of high temperatures. Dozens of special incendiary bombs were thrown over, raising the temperature to almost the surface of the sun, and the breath of the ice beast suddenly wilted. In the end, because the thick skin forged by low temperature was blown open, half of the body was blown to pieces. Suddenly, a series of heavy footsteps echoed through the snow, and the snowflakes in the sky became heavier. With the constant loud roars, dozens of huge figures more than 10 meters tall rushed out of the snow curtain, waving long knives and maces made of ice. The next moment, Natasha Romanoff rushed over with lightning in the sky, and Mjolnir pointed forward. "Thunder! Crush them! Attack!" The leading ice giant roared, and several ice giants in the front row pressed their weapons against the ground, making a series of heavy roars. Suddenly, rows of solid ice spread rapidly on the road, turning into rows of sharp and huge amounts of ice spikes, rushing towards the thunder. Rows of thunder and rows of ice spikes, constantly squeezed and eliminated. Natasha Romanoff snorted lightly, shook Mjolnir, and flew out a graceful arc. Its speed had broken through the constraints of physical laws and instantly passed through the gaps of countless ice spikes. The next moment, she raised the hammer with full fighting spirit, and in the wanton lightning, she mercilessly smashed at the giants of Jotunheim. Boom! The leading giants of Jotunheim was knocked to the ground by a hammer. However, he just struggled for a while and got up again. The scars left on his body by Natasha Romanoff's heavy blow were like toothpicks. The box of winter is to the giants of Jotunheim what the eternal fire is to Surti. Surti without the eternal fire cannot even defeat Thor, but Surti with the eternal fire can demolish the entire Asgard. Among these giants of Jotunheim blessed by the box of winter, the king of the giants of Jotunheim, Lof, is not among them, so they are naturally not comparable to the complete version of Surti. However, they still became very scary monsters. Almost every one of them is not inferior to the three warriors of Asgard. Especially the guy who confronted Natasha Romanoff. He is Skrymer, the Asgardian of the king's court of the giants of Jotunheim, Utgard, and his status in the giants of Jotunheim is similar to Heimdall of Skard. He was blessed by the box of winter, and his strength at the moment was no less than that of the hammer god. It would be very difficult for Natasha Romanoff to defeat him. Damn human! Skrymer's eyes were burning with murderous fire. He got up from the ground, swung the huge axe full of murderous intent, and smashed it towards Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff's expression changed slightly, and she raised the hammer to block in front of her. A large amount of air around the hammer was gathered together by magic power, turning into an air shield that was almost visible to the naked eye, like an ominous mirage. Boom! The air in the shield that was compressed to the extreme was released in an instant, and the continuously leaked air pressure gathered into a strong hurricane, which violently blew away Natasha Romanoff's red hair and swept her away. Oops! Stark, who was dealing with a giant of Jotunheim with his flexible movements, couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Natasha Romanoff being swept away. "Little bug, you should concentrate." At the moment when Stark was distracted, the giant of Jotunheim on the opposite side grinned and stepped down with his big foot like a heavy dark cloud falling. At this time, with the whistling sound of the wind, Lin Chongqing rushed over, raised his hand, and waved a large energy wave, which rippled in the void and hit the other leg of the giant of Jotunheim. The big guy made a muffled sound, and his body tilted to the side. Lin Chongqing immediately gathered his hands together, and the dazzling white light flashed in his palms, bursting out with a thunderous roar. The flashing electromagnetic waves, wrapped in ultra-high temperature, hit the chest of the giant of Jotunheim and immediately aroused a strong aura. Jotunheim screamed in pain, trying to get up. Instantly, Lin Chongqing sneered and blasted out a sonic punch, plowing the giants of Jotunheim from head to toe. In a breath, the power of the landslide was concentrated together, blowing the giant's huge body into smoke. The first casualty of the giants of Jotunheim appeared. The SHIELD agent arrived in a Quinjet, and a 20mm Balkan machine gun was protruding from the bottom. The 6-round gun muzzle burst out bright gun flames and fired at Scrymer. The backward technology of human civilization cannot harm the giants of Jotunheim, but it is no problem to attract their attention. Almost at the same time, the mighty thunder appeared in the flash. The thunderous sound cut through the sky. Monster die! Natasha Romanoff pushed the power of Mjolnir to the extreme, and the endless power of thunder exploded with a roaring storm. The fiercely entangled lightning illuminated the surrounding darkness. In front of the full-scale explosion of Mjolnir, Scrymer only had time to block the giant axe in front of him, and was pierced by the condensed thunder. Witnessing the power of Thor for the first time, a group of spectators were stunned with surprise. Even if it is a weakened version of Thor, it is still Thor. I have seen that guy. In the hotel lobby that was converted into a temporary command room, Lei Dachui pointed at the ice giant leader on the screen and shouted, "He is the captain of the guards of King Lao Fei of Giants of Jotunheim, a very powerful giant of Jotunheim. It used to be rubbish in front of my hammer." Darcy curled her lips. "Where's your hammer?" Lei Dachui felt that he was injured again. "Don't you know that you should not expose someone's shortcomings when scolding him?" Sitwell looked at the tense battle situation, turned his head to look at the dark-boiled egg, and asked nervously, "Sir, when will the military support arrive?" He just watched here, always feeling uneasy. Fury sat in front of the command desk, paused for a moment, and said lightly, "Just watch. At least from the current point of view, we still have the upper hand." Scrymer was beaten all over, but his strong physique prevented him from being blown to death by Mjolnir. However, he became more and more anxious. The purpose of their trip was to kill Thor, and they had to do it before Heimdall found out. Once Asgard's reinforcements arrived, their plan would fail completely. Crack! Under Scrymer's control, large pieces of ice were shot out like bullets, and the powerful force slightly resisted, giving him a chance to get out of the lightning bombardment. As for the Quinjet in the sky, even if he stood there, it couldn't hurt him. In a flash, Scrymer rolled and crawled, breaking free from the vibe of thunder. He did not try to retaliate against Natasha Romanoff, but strode towards the town, rushing forward like a hungry wolf. "Where are you going?" Natasha Romanoff's silver wrist armor made a crisp sound, and she swung Mjolnir again. The blooming lightning brushed Scrymer's arm and almost tore the pillar-like arm apart. Natasha Romanoff, Stark, and Lin Chongqing were all stopped by the giants of Jotunheim. Even if they could fly, it was useless. 20 or so giants of Jotunheim, either relying on their tall bodies or using large amounts of frost magic, held back the people who tried to come back for help, while Scrymer was getting closer and closer to Thor. The Quinjet in the air fired bullets like a torrential rain, splashing huge amounts of ice flowers on Scrymer's back like a waterfall, and several launch-tracking missiles lost control under the swirling frost before they got close to the giant's body, and just spun and fell towards the town, setting off several roaring sparks, which could not slow down his pace at all. The giants of Jotunheim are targeting this place. Fury quickly pulled out his pistol, looked at the silly Thor, and reminded him, "Thor, there must be some signal source on you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to find you so easily." Before Thor could answer, Phil Coulson suddenly said, "Sir, we detected energy similar to Bifrost, and it seems that another friend from Asgard has arrived." Along with Bifrost came Sif and the 3 warriors of Asgard. Because the god king Odin entered the Odin sleep, Thor was exiled to the earth again. With the support of the queen Frigga, Loki temporarily took over the kingship of Asgard. However, Loki could deceive his mother Frigga, but it was difficult to hide from Heimdall's eyes. When the giants of Jotunheim invaded the earth again, even though he was deceived by Loki's illusion for a moment, Heimdall quickly broke free and turned on Bifrost to teleport Sif and the other four to the earth to rescue the life-threatening Thunderhammer. However, because the Bifrost landed outside the town, it would take a little time for the four to rush to Thor's side. Skrymer was faster. As an old rival of the Aesir gods, he was very familiar with the appearance of Bifrost. As long as he saw the aurora suddenly appearing in the night sky in the distance, he knew that the most worried thing had happened. He could have left in advance, but he could not give up the task that was about to be completed. The Thunderhammer broke into Jotunheim and fought hastily. The giants of Jotunheim found many problems. Now Odin is a lion in his twilight years. Although he still looks strong, his teeth are almost gone. However, Thor perfectly inherited Odin's powerful genes. Maybe he will be an invincible Odin again in a short time. Jotunheim has been oppressed for more than 1,000 years and does not want to be suppressed anymore. For the freedom of Jotunheim, Thor must die. Damn giants of Jotunheim! Volstagg, the oldest of the three warriors, has long hair and beard. He looks a little fat, but he is one of the most elite warriors in Asgard. When he was young, he was called Lion of Asgard and had great strength. Although he became clumsy after getting older, he still had good strength. After he rushed into the battle group of the giants of Jotunheim, he jumped high, holding up a giant hammer weighing several tons, and smashed down like a meteorite. As the ground shook, an ice giant was smashed and his plastic bag was exposed. Volstagg laughed triumphantly, and the shrewd Fandral skated forward, constantly waving his rapier to distract the giants of Jotunheim, and shouted to Sif, "Sif, we will clear the way for you. Go and rescue Thor." Understood. Surrounded by the three warriors of Asgard, the agile goddess Sif held the sword and shield and passed through several giants of Jotunheim. "Hey, who are you?" Stark noticed them and aimed the beam cannon at them. Sif said hurriedly, "Midgardians, we are from Asgard, and we are here to find our prince. Do you know where he is?" Speaking of which, it is not only Thor and Loki who discriminate against humans. This concept is prevalent in the whole Asgard. After all, the weak bodies of Earthlings are well known, and even 3-year-old children in Asgard cannot defeat them alone. However, after seeing several people fighting with the enhanced giants of Jotunheim, the Asgardians who respect the strong can't help but use a respectful tone. "Oh, that muscle monster. Beth." Stark, who plays with his brain, can't really respect Thor, who is full of muscles, and points to the other side of the town, in the temporary base over there. He is not afraid that the other party is playing a trick because he has heard Thor mention it roughly before and knows some of the main characters in Asgard. The little friends accompanying Thor are naturally the focus. The few people in Asgard wanted to ask more questions, and more giants of Jotunheim came over. These guys took the wrong medicine. Why are they so difficult to deal with? Need to ask? It must be Loki's work. Stop talking nonsense. Our mission is to protect Thor. He has been deprived of his divine power by the God King. Even ordinary giants of Jotunheim may harm Thor's life. According to the plan, Sif, we will help you open a way. You go to protect Thor, and a few of us will stay around these Midgard warriors to deal with the giants of Jotunheim together. Okay. Fandar and Hogun immediately cast a sword shadow, cooperating with Stark to force back the surrounding giants of Jotunheim, while Volstagg lifted Sif to his shoulder and then threw him diagonally into the air. Swish, swish, swish. Ice blades chased the figures in the air, but they all fell into the void, providing Sif with a point of support. Bang! After more than a dozen consecutive jumps, Sif landed lightly on the ground, supported the spear thrown by the giants of Jotunheim behind him with one hand, and was pushed out dozens of meters. Closer. There was no obstruction in front, but under the lights hundreds of meters away, there was clearly a largest ice giant rushing toward the building at the end. Thor was there. Sif realized this problem and rushed over without thinking. Getting closer and closer to Thor's position, Asgard's reinforcements were stopped by the frost giants. and Skrymer's mood became more and more cheerful. Asterisk M. Shuh. An arrow passed through the ice and went straight to Skrymer's face. Skrymer snorted coldly and blocked the ice axe in front of him. Ding! The arrow penetrated the ice axe a little and hung on the axe, but was soon frozen by the new ice. Midgard! Skrymer's mocking voice just sounded, and the arrow nailed on the axe suddenly glowed red and exploded with a bang. Although it is just a thin arrow, it is one of the highest achievements of the SHIELD Research Department, and its explosion force is no less than that of a single-soldier fuel air bomb. The fuel air explosive agent mixes with the air and explodes violently, causing overpressure and temperature field effects on the target, as well as the flushing effect of high-temperature and high-pressure explosion products, which is just right for dealing with ice giants who are afraid of high temperatures. Hawkeye's fuel air explosive arrow exploded, and the explosion shockwave destroyed the ice axe. The explosion wave reflected and superimposed around Skrymer, and he was pushed back a few steps, and ran into the chasing female war god Sif. The fuel air bomb could not cause much damage to the giants of Jotunheim, but Sif's long sword endowed with magic by Odin could. TSK. Skrymer, who was dizzy from the high temperature, was pierced through the heart by Sif's full-strength sword before he woke up from the dizziness. Sif, the goddess of war, was still posing on the ground when she heard the voice she had been thinking about for a long time. She turned her head and looked in the direction of the voice. She saw the thunderhammer she had been thinking about standing behind a glass door, jumping and jumping like a fool. Thor. Sif immediately smiled like a flower, and her heroic spirit was a little more charming, but the hammer completely ignored it. Speaking of which, Sif is Heimdall's sister, the second-generation goddess of Asgard, and was Thor and Loki's playmate when they were children. When Sif was young, like most Asgardians, she had golden hair as bright as the sun. But when she was a teenager, Loki was jealous that she liked Thor more than himself, so he planned to tease her and cut off all her golden hair while she was sleeping. For this reason, Sif, who was still a little girl, cried loudly, and her crying startled the whole of Asgard. Loki knew he would be punished for this, so he rushed to the dwarf kingdom and asked the dwarf to help make some pure gold wigs for Sif as compensation. The dwarfs agreed to his request, but Loki was not prepared to pay the bill, so he found an opportunity to steal the hair and gave it to Sif. However, because the hair had not been completed before Loki stole it, the hair gradually darkened and finally turned from golden to black. When Sif started crying again, her parents began to get tired of her vanity, so they sent her to other planets to learn how to fight and let her become one of the 10 armed girls. Many years later, Sif returned to Asgard. The once crying girl had become a heroic woman, and Lake Dachui, who had a good impression of Sif, completely regarded her as a good brother. All I can say is that it's all Loki's fault. When Sif was about to face Thor, Thor's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Sif, be careful." Before he finished speaking, huge amounts of ice axes swung over, knocking Sif, who was caught off guard, out like a stone. "Thor, I'm coming for you." Skrymer roared excitedly, poking the huge ice axe into the ground, and the ice layer on the ground suddenly turned into countless ice cones, hitting Thor head-on. Seeing hundreds of ice cones about to pierce Thor's body, a large piece of thunder exploded, destroying the attacking ice cones in an instant. Skrymer was shocked and thought that Thor had recovered his divine power. But when he looked closely, he found that there was a black-haired human in front of Thor. At this time, only Lin Chongqing could come. Sif was seriously injured by the giants of Jotunheim. Thor angrily encouraged Lin Chongqing. "Lin, beat this guy." Lin Chongqing glanced at him and sighed. "Thor, even at this time, your seal is still not unlocked." Thor choked and said depressedly, "No." Lin Chongqing had no choice. He just pretended to be entangled by the ice giant just to see if Thor could awaken from the brink of death. However, seeing that this guy was really about to be torn into pieces by the ice spear, he did not change at all. Lin Chongqing couldn't really watch him die and then rushed to rescue him at supermach speed. But Thor, who had walked around the Yellow Springs Road, still had no intention of breaking free from the seal. Is this guy really going to die once? What if he's really killed and can't survive? In the original plot, Thor, who was slapped down by the destroyer, may not really die. Thor, die with these bugs. The opposite Scrymer couldn't help it and took a step, waving huge amounts of ice axes and chopped down with ice. The pistols of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Hawkeye's high-tech arrows, and even the machine guns of Quinjet were useless against the giants of Jotunheim. At this moment, a strange light burst out. On Lin Chongqing's body, the cold light quickly condensed and merged into a dazzling beam of light. I spear 100 Fangs whirlwind. Under the illumination of this cold light, the frozen air turned into a clear flash, rolled up countless whirlpools, and swallowed Scrymer in. Every molecule in the giants of Jotunheim was exposed to the cold shock, and they couldn't help but scream. When the icy light disappeared in the night, Scrymer also disappeared at the same time. Even the giants of Jotunheim, living in the cold world, could not resist the invasion of Absolute Zero. Lin, your magic is much more terrible than Loki. Ah, Sif. Thor rubbed his chin in astonishment, enduring the violent wind blowing from high above, but he could finally calm down temporarily. He rushed into the ruins that Sif had knocked down, pulled Sif out of the rubble, and asked, Sif, what will happen without you? Sif frowned painfully and replied with difficulty, Thor, I'm fine. Just take a rest for a while, but you have to go home quickly. Thor's face changed slightly, and he smiled bitterly. You know I can't go back. I'm no longer Thor. My father died because of me. I must continue to be exiled. Sif frowned slightly, not understanding why he thought that god Odin was dead. Thor, your father just fell into Odin's sleep. Boom! In the roar of countless icicles, a colder light surged out of the darkness 100 meters away. This extremely cold air, with a diameter of 4 or 5 meters, brushed past Lin Chongqing and instantly froze him into an ice ball. The edge of the cold air swept over Thor and Sif, and both of them were immediately covered with icicles. In a flash, the two turned into ice sculptures. What followed was that the sky and the earth were covered with frost, and the houses, roads, cars in the town spread dazzling white. This land, known for its dry climate, turned into a polar region in an instant. What's going on? The conspiracy of the giants of Jotunheim? Fury was frightened and stood back to back with Phil Coulson, holding pistols and vigilantly patrolling the surroundings. Hawkeye drew his bow and arrow and reminded, Sir, there are still enemies hiding in the dark. Fury immediately said, Kick him out. Yes, Hawkeye agreed, and the arrow in his hand shot out. Snap! This arrow was caught by a hand. The other party held a metal box in one hand, with a mocking smile on his face, and walked out of the darkness, shouting triumphantly, Human, do you think you can do it with... Bang! As soon as he said this, the arrow in his palm exploded like a bomb. The heavy shockwave raised by the black technology arrow threw the person more than 10 meters away, and even the box in his hand was thrown out. Loki, it's you again. When the Iron Man who came saw the person, and then looked at the frozen Lin Chongqing, he ejected the missile launcher without thinking and bombarded Loki lying on the ground with 10 rounds. But when the dust and smoke dissipated in the cold wind, Loki's figure disappeared. Stark, be careful. As soon as Natasha Romanoff's alarmed reminder sounded, Loki's voice sounded from behind Stark. Human, it seems that the lesson I taught you is not enough. 2 artifact daggers stabbed out from behind, and the target was still Iron Man's kidney. In front of Asgard's god-level weapons, the superalloys on Earth are as fragile as tofu. The previous kidney shot almost took Stark's life, this time without Lin Chongqing's help. If Stark was stabbed again, he would have no choice but to die. However, Stark has always been a person who knows how to sum up experience. Each generation of his steel battle suit will be upgraded to a new level based on the previous weaknesses. 0. This time, because the time was too short, the steel battle suit has not been upgraded yet, but in the previous few hours, Stark has used rough means to make a preliminary replacement of the battle suit. So, When Loki used the same trick again and stabbed his kidney with a dagger, the back armor of the steel battle suit suddenly dislocated upwards, revealing an arc pulse cannon. Bang! The arc pulse was so powerful that Loki, who was close at hand, was knocked out. You arrogant B asterisk 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 D. Do you think I won't learn from my lesson? Stark sneered, turned the muzzle of the gun, and fired again. This time, they basically hit the target, but just like the last battle, they could not cause any real damage. Natasha Romanoff, you come. Stark rolled his eyes after fighting in vain, and simply called his teammates to play. At the moment when Lin Chongqing had no choice but to go offline, Black Widow, holding the copycat Mjolnir, was naturally the most qualified comrade-in-arms. But before he finished speaking, thunder suddenly exploded in the sky in the distance. Then, in the madly rolling dark clouds, an ancient hammer fell like lightning. Crack! Accompanied by the deafening sound of thunder, the ice wrapped around Thor and Sif suddenly shattered. The falling Mjolnir fell into Thor's palm. The next moment, the sky was filled with thunder. In the rapidly flashing lightning, the men's thunder armor was attached to Thor's body. Thor, who experienced another death calamity, finally got his divine calendar back.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.